you, Chloe. All right, so we're recording. All right, so on first base, ladies and gentlemen, we have Mari Coates. Mari's recently published first novel, The Pelton Papers, reimagines the life of the American modernist painter Agnes Pelton and won the 2020 Bronze Medal from the Independent Book Publishers Association. She graduated from the program for writers at Warren Wilson in 1995. Take it away, Mari.
Thank you so much, Leslie. And thank you, Sprawwl. You guys are great. It's just been a blast putting this together with you. And some of you, a lot of you from the Warren Wilson community have heard bits of this over many, many years. It took me a long time to write. But I'm so happy that it's finally here and done. And I'm going to just read from the beginning. This is based in Cathedral City, California, near Palm Springs. And so the heading is Cathedral City, California, January 3rd, 1961. Draw a line from Stuttgart, where I was born, a child lured by beauty. Circle the cities in Europe where my mother took me while my father traveled. And then in my 7th year, arc it over the ocean to Brooklyn, where we settled at last with my grandmother. My parents had met in Europe, a pair of expatriates, each temporarily liberated from a family tragedy. My father, from a fine Southern family, was orphaned early and decamped to the continent to find himself. My mother's circumstances were more complicated. She had intruded upon her mother and their family minister, found them in a compromising position, and frightened had told her father about it. This unleashed a scandal that led to a very public trial in New York, at which she was forced to testify. Afterward, my shattered mother was sent to Germany to resume her music studies, where she met and married my father, and where I was born in 1881. Imagine my parents groping their way around Europe with me in tow, a sickly, fussy child. My mother's imminent concert career halted before it began by overwork as a student. They called it frozen hands. Think of it. After all she'd been through, her life's dream destroyed by overzealous teaching at the conservatory. My father, sensitive and moody, undertook long, exhausting walking tours, leaving my mother with me in random hotels. Eventually, he would limp back to us, and then she had both of us to nurse to health. Picture me small and swathed in fur while my parents moved about restlessly. Stuttgart to Basel, then Rotterdam, then Paris, and back to Stuttgart. I have such an impression of darkness in my past, as one would compared to the brilliance of this desert light. Dark rooms in high-ceilinged apartments in Europe, my early life under a pallid sky crowded with heavy clouds, the weak sun making a brave front but retreating every time. And yet there was such beauty to it, streaming silver trolley wires over rain-washed streets, sharp shadows intersecting at perfect angles with the buildings, the sky racing by overhead while faces peered down at me in my protective bundle. My health from the beginning was dangerously precarious. My mother, whom I called Maman in the French way, was forever leaning in to touch my forehead with her cool fingers. She's feverish, I can hear her saying to Papa, whom I can see sitting across a marble-topped table, enjoying his newspaper and a cup of coffee. A small cigar burns in his fingers, and the smoke fascinates me, trailing in leisurely ribbons around his head and then disappearing. A sigh from Papa. He pulls a large watch from his vest, a beautiful thing with gold hands and a rising sun, setting moon, which I am permitted to hold when I am fretful. We've barely been here 20 minutes, Florence, he says. His lips are tight and his eyes distant. He glances at me, wrapped in blankets, even though I'm at least 3, maybe even 4 years old, and should be sitting prettily on a spindly chair between my parents. But I am always bundled, always defended against something. Cafes were a compromise. Mama would have kept me away from all dangerous crowds, and Papa would have plunged us into the markets, the museums, the fancy stores with the huge windows and high ceilings. One day he did precisely that. We were striding down a boulevard and he was carrying me. Mama was next to us, hurrying to keep up. And then he turned abruptly through a revolving glass door into a grand perfumery, a sudden smile on his face. When Papa smiled, his whole face would open and expand, leaving an impression of dazzling beauty. He inhaled deeply, and I followed his example. The air was tender with scent. "Isn't that wonderful?" he whispered. We zigzagged through the strolling shoppers to the very center of the store. "Look, Aggie, look up," he crowed. I did, leaning back so suddenly he had to grab the front of my coat with his free hand. And there, soaring overhead, was a wondrous Tiffany glass ceiling. "Flowers," I cried, pointing. "Yes," Papa was delighted with me. "Flowers," I repeated louder. "Hush, darling." Mama was aware of the people looking our way. Children were not welcome in a store with so much fragile and valuable stock. But I was in heaven. Light streamed through the Tiffany blooms, catching hundreds of perfect bottles, row upon row on shelves that seemed to climb endlessly. Colors such as I had never seen glowing all around me. On the counter nearby was a tall ruby red glass container. Papa threaded his way through the crowd while Mama held the tail of my little coat. There were so many people. I think I had never been before in a crowd. "William," Mama said. "William, we should go." Papa stopped and regarded my mother evenly. His eyes were close to me, much closer than usual. His hair, dark and brilliant, curled over his high, stiff collar, his beard smooth and trim. While he and Mama argued quietly about whether or not it was dangerous for me to be exposed to so many strangers, I reached with my hand and carefully, gently touched his beard with the tips of my fingers. It is how I imagined a cat might feel. I was not allowed to pet cats or dogs or any animal, with the occasional exception of the milkman's horse, and then I was immediately whisked away to wash. Papa batted my hand away as though shooing a fly. Mortified, I started to cry, and Papa thrust me into Mama's waiting arms. "There now," she tried to soothe me, patting my back. I was quickly borne out of the perfumery and into the cold, where a light snow had begun to fall. That's it.
Thank you, Mari.
Thank you.
All right, everyone, unmute. Good, Mari.
Yay, Mari! Yay! Beautiful.
Really super.
Thank you.
Awesome, Mari. Awesome.
That was lovely, Mari. Thank you.
Beautiful.
Such a
So
good
good to hear
reading.
it read.
Fascinated by all those details, beautiful details. All right, everyone. Our second reader tonight is Judy French. Judy is
Yay,
a writer.
Judy.
and a teacher of children, which, now that I'm homeschooling my own children, I can tell you is beyond heroic.
And horses.
She's also very good at it, which is very difficult to do. Her prose and poetry have appeared in the Colorado Review, Vestal Review, Nano, and Opium, as well as other journals. She graduated from the program for writers at Warren Wilson in 1998. All right, everyone, mute it. You're on, Judy.
Thanks. Thank you all. I want to thank the organizers of the Sprawwl for this chance to read my work. I don't do it often. And thank you, all of you, joining us today from all over New Jersey, New Mexico, the middle part. There are states in there, they tell me. Though there are many things going on in the world today that are really rough and really awful, this ain't one of them. This is fabulous. And thank you so much for making this thing. It's a very good thing. Thank you for being here. I'm going to read some of my shorter work today. I'm sort of the sherbet course in between, the main meat prose there. And this first piece that I'm going to read was written about 4 years ago and tinkered with ever since. And I pulled it out a little while ago and went, oh, sort of fits for our times. The first piece title is Heed. After we adapted, repurposing ourselves, adjusting, all finally employed. We fenced the yards and parking lots with citizens standing upright, picketed shoulder to shoulder. We marked the lanes of traffic and parking lots with our bodies as human-formed vehicles tumbled slowly past. Soldiers swung like trapeze artists to link arms and legs across rivers and gorges, creating bridges of muscle and bone. Prisoners in orange jumpsuits crawled down the city streets on their bellies, sweeping the streets clean each night as cows licked the pavement behind them. Little people snaked drains with their bodies and pushed through the earth, making ditches and culverts, kicking infants powered generators. We started singing. Executives tilled office parking lots into vegetable gardens, plowing the earth with one another head first. Midwives, aided by senators, the military, and clergy, stitched whole libraries of tax code and defense protocols into quilts, bedspreads, and curtains. All did whatever they could and sang every hour of the day. Poets bartered commodities when they were available, amended soil with their waste when they were not. Composers filled reservoirs with orchestras, music crashing through the pipes into dry fountains and apartment sinks. Farmers made Bibles of seeds and left them in every nightstand drawer, hotels and residences alike. Cattle dogs chivied stray children to orphanages where they were cobbled into street signs and billboards or spun into telephone and electrical wire. Waving, cheering citizens formed the branches and trunks of trees that bent and swayed in the wind of our productivity. All holidays became work days. All days of the week were designated for singing. Even the dead found industry, their stirring bones mixing with the dirt, which then grew never before seen species of paper, simple machines and small swimming mammals, caskets and funerary urns broke into pieces as the formerly living returned to the workforce to join in the effort, while the shards and splinters of their vessels became jewelry that adorned the necks and ears of monks in traveling circuses. Eventually, the dead became roads and pavement, culverts and drains, their bones interwoven and layered as the feet of the living pressed them together. The work progressed and we all felt so useful, so needed. The air rang with song as we marched by in the early morning dusk. Every road of bones and men filled with those going to jobs, sieving waste out of waterways with silver spoons, weaving homes of grass and hair with our newly nimble fingers, raking the earth with our teeth like tiny shovels. We sang every night while making festivals of skin and light to celebrate the day's progress. All sang with this ecstasy of usefulness, of purpose, of employment, The time of confusion had finally passed. All sang and sang in the morning, in the afternoon and night. All repurposed, adapted, adjusted, employed. Yep, that's what I do. So that's a cautionary tale or something. And then I do have a sort of stock and trade of little cautionary tales that are a little sort of off fairy tale-ish. And I'm going to read one of those now to you, one of my very dearest. It's called Again Tonight. Again tonight, the floor is swimming in mice, their brown, silky backs waving toward the bedroom door, a solid mass of them running for the opening. They are beautiful, he thinks, and trails his fingers through their fur, hanging his arm down over the side of the bed, watching the moon silver the hair, in ripples as they race under his hand. You do not scare me, he whispers to the dark, while the mice cover the floor like a living carpet. Night after night, they do this, moving from a hole under the window, across the land below his bed, and out to the hallway. From there, he does not know where they go. They are an army, and they are marching toward a battle he wishes he could see. Night after night, he watches the stream of them, hears the soft thrum of tiny paws across the wood, sees the colors of bodies change from brown to gray to black to red-eyed white. The flood slows to a trickle, and finally, the last mice come out of the wall. As they pass under his hand, one stops, runs up his arm, and whispers in his ear, "Come, come with us." And his heart pounds and pounds, but he does not move. And then they are gone. That's a little cautionary tale, people. Follow the mice. I'm telling you, if ever there was a time where we needed magic, and good forthright social justice, of course, as well, but a little magic and a little whimsy and a little remembering that the smaller voices can absolutely tell us something. My last piece here is a benediction of sorts. Somebody asked me, do you write poetry or do you write fiction? I said, yes. I hate to title it because the lens itself shifts sometimes the reception. So you can call this whatever you like, but for me, it's a blessing. This is Inside the Folds of the Counted Hills. Inside the folds of the counted hills, one is a cleft of firs, dark and haunted. Two is narrow and flooded with dirty water. Three holds a rocky path of tattooed men. Four is filled with wild iris floating in mud. Five is found only in May after a tule fog. Six seems like a way out to the sea. Seven is crawling with plated things. And the eighth is open like a mouth. Inside the folds of the eighth, one, the city men make weapons of seeds. Two, the bee people grind in the woods. Three, the gold falls up from the ground. Four, the shamed and the stupid dig their own graves. Five, the crosses cover the dirt in hundreds. Six, the broken ghosts crawl under the oaks like spiders. Seven, the junk glitters in piles to the chin, and the eighth mouth leaks a prayer. Inside the prayer of the eighth mouth, one, the tang of copper, green and dripping. Two, the scream of a red-tailed hawk calling. Three, the hit of spirits out of the bottle dropping. 4, the sting of insects all around, biting. 5, the groan of pleasure from under the oak, making. 6, the howl of hunting coyotes, eating. 7, the sigh of God, watching. And then, and inside, then, amen. Thank you so much. Thank you very, very much.
Wow. Wow.
Unmute, everyone. The mantra
Hey.
of the pandemic. Unmute, unmute.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hey.
Be well, stay safe, stay well.
Thank you, Judy. Thank you for that little sliver of your brain that you just shared with us. All right. Last but certainly not least, I'm thrilled to present Helen Fremont. Helen's recent memoir, The Escape Artist, was named an editor's choice by the New York Times and a best new book by People magazine. Her first memoir, After Long Silence, was a national bestseller. Her short stories have appeared in Prize Stories, the O. Henry Awards, Ploughshares, Harvard Review, and other publications. She graduated from the program for writers at Warren Wilson in 1991. All right, everyone. Now, give Helen some love and then mute it.
Okay. Thank you, Leslie. Thank you, guys. It's such a privilege and pleasure to be here, and such an honor to read with Judy and Mari, whose work I love. And thanks to all you guys at Sprawwl for making this happen. So I'm going to read a few little snippets from this new book. They hop around, but it's pretty much from the beginning of the book. Sisters are a setup. Shot from the same cannon, you're sent on a blind date for the rest of your lives. My sister Laura and I had a script we were supposed to follow. My mother and her sister, Zosha, had written it, and they were our role models, which is pretty scary when you consider what they'd been through. During the war, Zosha had saved my mother's life. Or maybe it was the other way around. The stories were twisted, and my mother and aunt were bound together in ways that Laura and I didn't begin to understand, but we did our best to follow for most of our lives. Although Zosha lived in Italy and we lived in upstate New York, Mom and Zosha's love was formidable, the stuff of legend, built on a mythic past. One day, they told us, my sister and I would have what they had. But unlike my mother and aunt, Laura and I didn't have any real wars to test our bond. We had to make up our own. From our earliest years, we liked to go to extremes with each other. We tested our limits, pushed ourselves and each other a little further, a little harder to see how much we could take, to prove how much we loved each other. I'm going to skip ahead to a short section, starts with my father, who was a physician and had been imprisoned in Siberia in the Gulag for 6 years before escaping. While my father was in Siberia, fellow prisoners had broken his left elbow while trying to steal his clothes. Years later, surgeons removed the calcified joint and sewed him back together. My father tried not to speak of his years as a prisoner, but he acted like a man who had lived with beasts. He wolfed his meals in seconds, and nothing my mother said or did could get him to slow down. I can't, he'd say helplessly. It's food. He kept ferociously busy, saw patients day and night, built rock ledges behind the house, planted bushes, mulched trees, and chopped wood. At night, his shrieking nightmares jolted us awake. The next morning, my mother would dismiss them with the weary shrug, saying, "The Gulag again," as if genocide were just one more annoyance that kept intruding in our lives. We never knew when an image or a sound or a fight between my sister and me would trip the invisible wire, and my father would blurt out a horrifying incident from the camps, or my mother would cry, I should have died with my parents. Don't you understand? We shouldn't be alive. My sister and I would freeze. The whole planet froze as we watched our parents being stolen from us by the past. Through such experiences, Laura and I laid down the framework of our own story. We absorbed their secrets and turned them into our own drama. Maybe it wasn't an exact translation of our parents' war, but it was the best we could do with what we had. To Mom and Dad's unspoken past, we added our own hunger, the rapacity of children who have everything and still want more: love, attention, adoration. Laura and I fought each other as if battling for the last scrap of oxygen in the house, as if there were only room in our parents' hearts for one child. We fought off stage. Well, my mother was cleaning the house or writing her sister, and my father was in the office or the hospital. Our fights did not compare to the more pressing concerns of earning a living and running a household. In the annals of competitive suffering, Laura and I knew from an early age that we were lucky to be irrelevant. But on the scorecard of our daily lives as children, we wanted to matter. And of course, we did matter very much to our parents, as long as we did our jobs as blue-chip children and straight-A students. My life is over, Mom often told us. My life ended in the war. You are all that matter. We were small shoots now, perhaps, but with care and feeding and sunlight, with green vegetables and vitamins and snowsuits in winter and sunblock in summer, with French lessons and piano lessons and ballet lessons and swim lessons, we would grow strong, cultured, and smart, and we would redeem all that had been taken from her, restore reason in the world. And oh my, the love! Our parents loved Laura and me with such a ferocity, it was hard to remain standing in the face of it. They loved us with cyclone force. They loved the arms right out of our sockets. My friends were loved with the casual American ease of prairie love, of cows grazing in a fenced-in field. My sister and I were loved with the blazing heat of immigrant love, the scorched earth love of a people hunted down, displaced and resettled countless times before clawing their way to the topsoil of upstate New York. Over time, our fights got worse. Laura started going on eating binges and tore through the kitchen, devouring boxes of cookies. My mother followed her. Please, Laura, she begged, talk to me. One time, Laura grabbed a carving knife and backed my mother out of the kitchen before ransacking the cabinets for flour and sugar to make a batch of cookies. Mom marched back in and stunned Laura by pouring half a gallon of milk down the sink. For Mom, throwing away food was like slashing open a vein. It was as if the milk going down the drain were her own blood. You want to bake cookies? My mother shouted. You want to eat more? She slammed the empty carton down on the counter. There, no more milk, no cookies, no baking. Laura stared at Mom in horror. I'm sorry, Mommy, she said. I'm sorry. I cowered just outside the door. I pictured the police coming afterward to photograph the bodies and wipe up the blood and gather the bloody knife and milk carton and chocolate chips as evidence. And I would be able to testify for Mom. I would be able to tell someone what had happened in our family. I'm going to jump again for the last little bit, and we wound up in family therapy. What a surprise. I was 9 when my parents started talking about divorce during our family therapy sessions. And they went on talking about it at home, behind closed doors, when they thought Laura and I weren't listening. Of course, Laura and I were always listening, especially when they spoke Polish, a language neither of us understood. All the dangerous, important discussions between our parents were in Polish, and Laura and I translated them into our worst fears. Laura's worst fear was that they'd send her to a mental institution. My worst fear was that they would not. I didn't really understand what divorce was. I had classmates whose parents had died, but none who had divorced. This was back in the days before divorce spread through the suburbs like color TVs. It was my father who first brought it up one Friday night at the Hoffman Children and Family Center that spring of 1966. He was sitting with one knee over the other in the chair across from me, his maroon striped tie slightly askew under his dark suit jacket. He sounded very businesslike. After we get a divorce, I could move into my office. A divorce sounded like something that you bought, like a coffin in which you put your discarded marriage. As I understood it, once my parents went out and got one, Dad would visit us from across town, which made sense because he mostly worked all the time anyway. My mother didn't say anything, but sat very rigid, her back straight and knees together, her mouth a thin line. I stole a glance at Laura, who looked bug-eyed. For once, she wasn't even picking at her fingers. She was barely breathing. Frank also sat motionless, but her beehive of hair quivered. It was my father who could no longer live with us, he said icily, because he was a realist and my mother was not. Mom, I could tell, was angry. She didn't say a word, but stared at him as if he were a stack of dirty dishes. I said nothing, believing that things were more likely to go away if I ignored them. Thanks.
Thank you, Helen. Unmute, everyone.
Yeah,
Unmute.
that was
wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
What a treat.
So, all right, we're going to move into the question answer session. If you are not one of the readers, mute. And if you are one of the readers, unmute.
Unmute.
All right. Okay. Now I'm going to have to figure out if I do gallery view. I can't see all of you, but maybe once we start talking, I'll be able to see you. All right. Okay. I'm going to start in order in which you read, and then we're going to open it up for all of you to answer these questions. Mari.
Yes.
So your novel is historical, based on a real character.
Yes.
I know you did a lot of research. I'm going to put this on speaker view because I can't see you somehow. Speaker view.
Oh, you can't see me?
I can't see you.
Oh, that's sad. I can see you.
Oh, I can see you now. Yay, I can see you. All right. So in historical fiction, there are a lot of situations where things are not known. What choices did you make about the things you had to guess at?
Oh, well, actually, that is why I wrote it as fiction. Because I was, I knew about Agnes Pelton. We had her art in my house. My grandparents were friends of hers. And I never knew until there was an exhibit in 1996 of her abstract work. So when I read that catalog, which was a really pretty good biography, the curator said, well, we don't know this and we don't know that. And I just knew I had to write about her. And I thought, well, it's going to have to be fiction because I'm real interested in this and that. So that was, I made up what I thought was missing, essentially.
Give us an example. What did you make up or what did you guess at and make true in the fiction?
Well, I guessed, I don't know, I'm gay, and I guessed that she was gay. And I always had thought that for some reason. Gaydar. And yet there was absolutely nothing to indicate. I was very sad to hear this, that she did not have a relationship. I really wanted her to have love in her life. I thought she deserved it. And so I thought, and I still think, that probably she was by nature gay and was unable to do anything about it because of the family scandal that made anything, they were not permitted to stand out in any way after that. and she just, I think, couldn't deal with it. So I did have her, I made up that she fell in love with her mentor and patron, the woman who was the most helpful to her, who bought her work, who rented studios for her, who traveled with her, took her traveling. And I just thought, why wouldn't you be in love with somebody that believed in you and helped you like that? And so I did, but it was never something that was acted upon. It was really, I won't call it unrequited, because it was never brought forward to be rejected. Mm-hmm. So she did have love, and that's, I did make that up. So
there's so much in history that that is invisible by virtue of not having been allowed.
Yeah.
So I love that you did that. All right, Judy, I was intrigued. I'm going to put you in the spotlight. I was intrigued by our conversation the other day where you stated that you are absolutely allergic to labels. And I wonder if you will tell us a little bit about what it has been like to defy even basic classifications like genre, whether you're writing fiction or poetry. You studied fiction.
I did. I mean, that was my emphasis, because for me, like writing stories, whatever the story, what vessel the story would want to be poured into, whether it's poured into paragraphs, whether it's poured into dialogue, like, the way a screenplay looks, whether it's poured into stanzas, that it's the material that dictates the form. So I played a lot with form, so the things move around on the page. And it was a very odd, I love the MFA program, and I would say mostly because of this incredible network we have of writers across, around the world. But it was really hard. I mean, it's very binary, isn't it, to say fiction or poetry? We were laughing the other day because I was saying, like, Mari and Helen are creating whole wardrobes of clothing. I'm making like a bikini, so that's kind of what I do. And that's
a beautiful bikini.
A bikini. It's a really nice bikini.
It's so nice.
It's one of those ones that's like hundreds of dollars. No, I do have several drawer novels, that occasionally I unearth and dust off. And, but I do find that there's a lens that comes into either the reader's or the listener's mental view when you say it's either fiction or poetry. So yes, I mean, I would love for people to see my things on the page, but they live off the page just as easily. And it's probably because I also come from a theater background. So the page for me is a trampoline. The page canvas, the page is space to dance in. And if you choose to put things in paragraphs, then you do that form for a specific reason. Beautiful prose like Mari's and Helen's grows, and the story grows in those forms for a reason. There's a reason we choose those. And by the way, if you'd like to read my thesis,
I would love to read your thesis.
White space typography and punctuation and how it affects the influence of meaning.
Wow.
So moving through space. For a lot of folks, their first language is English or Spanish or whatever. My first language is movement. And those people who know me as a performer, or as a dancer, or for, also for my love of working with horses and things, my first thoughts are always in movement. So same thing with the page. I don't think I answered your question, but
I love that. You did. I love that. I love that you won't classify it. And
I'm just tired.
And it gives you a lot of freedom.
It's just tiring for me.
It's tiring to not have labels, or it's tiring to have labels?
Yeah, I think it's very limited.
To have to fit into a mold.
Yeah, and I think good writers treat language like fabric. And there's good marketing, good business reasons to put it into forms that you can market. I'm kind of an outsider. It's okay. It's
what's the upside?
The upside is I just explore my own stuff, and I don't care if anyone buys it or not.
Freedom.
I'm not counting on this. I'm not counting on the sales of things as as for my income, I never have.
Yeah.
Same thing as when I was dancing, you know, I mean, the choreographers were happy to pay us $20 at the performance, though we rehearsed for months. It wasn't
Wow.
about that. It was about just getting it done. So there you are.
Well, I personally am glad that you chose freedom. I really enjoyed those words today. All right, Helen, you also studied fiction at Warren Wilson. So why memoir?
Oh, I was going to say, I just wanted to first say that Judy can rock a bikini like no one else.
Yeah,
So I just
she
wanted
wears it well.
you can do that. That's
Even though my stomach doesn't tan, like,
yeah.
I love you. Thank you.
Yeah, well, you can even speak of a stomach as a separate body part. Some of us don't,
Much
you know,
information,
so it's like, well, I'll get to that. But, oh, I thought you were going to ask me what's wrong with me.
Yeah.
You know, I was going to ask you what's wrong with you, but I figured you would tell
We
us
don't
that
have that
anyway.
much time. We don't have enough time. So we'll just go to why memoir. You know, I really resisted memoir, and I was a fiction person at Warren Wilson, and I really didn't. I thought of memoir as like a lower life form, like, you know, if the highest was poetry, and then if you couldn't write poetry and rock a bikini, then you know were doing the prose, and then at least fiction was an art form, and it was really my fiction teachers from Wally that said, Helen, you can't write this as fiction. I thought they were telling me I wasn't good enough to write my family story as fiction, but they were just saying it won't pass the laugh test. I mean, there are certain things it's not, you have to make this memoir. And I was very disappointed at first, but then I embraced it and realized, no, my entire life has been a fiction. And my parents' lives were totally created and made up from one moment to the next, that it became really important to me to actually write what I knew to be my truth, which is totally different from, you know, theirs, but still it became really something that was important to me, at least for writing the family stories.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me that you started studying fiction when, as you've said, your whole life was a fiction.
Yeah.
And I'm now wondering, I'm sitting here wondering, I'm thinking about my own parents who've had their own fictions, and I'm wondering how many writers have this experience of dissonance between the reality that's presented and the truth, right?
Mm-hmm.
And fiction always has its own kind of truth. So I wanted to ask you, so your family has disowned you, and how do you regret having written about the truth, as it were, and unmasking this fiction?
I think I'm pretty lucky that either I have absolutely no moral compass whatsoever, or I just happen to be really lucky that I don't regret it, because it was impossible to continue living in that fiction. And so I really needed to state my own truth and be seen as who I am. And I think that, you know, I don't have any control over how my family would react to my writing.
Yeah.
As it turns out, my father was actually very supportive and not only wanted us to know that we were Jewish. We were raised Roman Catholic and didn't find out until we were in our 30s. So he was actually not the one who was keeping that secret. And he was very encouraging and was okay with it, but my mom was not. And, you know, it was something I don't have control over. The only thing I do have control over is what my truth is. And it became important to me to find out, what is my relationship? Where is my relationship with my family? Is it all illusory? And I think, unfortunately, it is. So I, you know, I'm sorry that that is the truth, but it is also something I have to accept. And there are some advantages to being dead. I mean, my parents declared me dead, and in fact, that there is something very freeing about that, in that you do feel, okay, I do have a right to my voice. I've been trying so hard to fit this mold and only say what's allowed to be said. And, you know, that's that's something that I got from it, although it would have been nice if I could have been free. And also, you know, in our family, you're either on the bus or off the bus. I was hoping we could just, you know, like I could run alongside the bus or something. No. So.
Yeah, yeah. So many of us struggle even in fiction with what can be said and what can't be said, and what we feel can be said, you know, and our personal cultures of secrecy.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that you did. It's a fascinating story, and you did a beautiful reading.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to throw out some questions to all of you. You can just fight and interrupt each other on Zoom. It'll be entertaining. All right, how do you come to or find your material?
I ask Mari what to write. She tells me, and I do it. And that's always worked for me. I mean, Mari and I have known each other, I don't know what, like 50 years now? How long? No, it's like...
I think it's up to 60, isn't it?
60, and so this has worked well for me. As you know, when I did what my parents said, it was terrible. When I do what Mari says, it's all worked out really well. So. And
I do the same thing. Helen tells me what to do. Helen tells me to keep doing it, and I do. It's
So obviously, Judy, you're the one with real inspiration here, because where do you get you're the real artist.
How do you come to this material?
So, you know, I have some really old fillings from like the 60s and 70s, and I'm getting away through them. I'm pretty sure that's it. I don't know. What the heck? I was a spoiled child, and no one ever tells me no. So that's pretty much
That's good. That's good. Judy, you are amazing.
Listen, and you should understand too that one of the things that, I mean, the reason why I do push back on labels and things like that is because I feel like there's this amplitude that doesn't happen, you know, often. There are fiction writers who are gorgeous with language, who could scatter it across the page in different ways. And then there are poets who write some pretty damn fine prose. So I don't know, whatever. Yes, the dogs speak to me, as do the crickets and other things. No, this is literally how I see the world. Yeah. I want the world I would like to be in worlds where the laws of physics do not apply. That is where I would like to live. Not for nothing, I've been watching Star Trek. Yes. And I think, you know, I think in this time where the normal is so crappy, like I'm looking for where the magic is. This is magic. Having all of these people all over the country together in one spot. Look, it's all crap out there, but not this. So I'm, you know, and trying to figure out how to teach and trying to figure out how to engage and all of that. We are going to do something. We're going to do something better.
And your dog agrees and is telling you what to say right now.
My dogs agree with me.
Oh my God, fantastic.
That's very wise of them.
Fantastic.
My cat is going to come in and yell at me now because it's her supper time and she's really fussed about it.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to ask one more question and then I'm going to go through this list. There's some very smart looking questions in there. All right. Are you writing during the pandemic? And if so, how do you stay motivated?
Oof. I'll take the last part.
Oof.
I'm writing, I just decided it was all so scary and horrible. And I felt like I was living in a cotton ball somehow. And I just, you know, Helen and I have in the past exchanged 15 minutes of writing each day at any time, no hours involved. And I said, come on, let's do it again. What do you say? And then, you know, a couple of other people are you know, so some of us are kind of feel like we're getting back into gear. And that's a really wonderful thing. It's so helpful. The news is so crazy that for 15 or 20 minutes, we can create just kind of what Judy was saying, you know, we live elsewhere. And that's a wonderful thing to me.
Yeah.
So compartmentalize.
Yes.
How about Helen and Judy?
I think the community is where the inspiration comes for me. I mean, so many people who are here now have, it's just through your work that, and I'm referring to everybody in the audience too who's writing, because there's so many people that I really get excited and turned on by reading what other people are doing, and that's what gets me going. I mean, and if I look at what's happening outside my window or in the television, or I'm just so depressed, or it just drives me up, and I have to take myself away from that and turn to the, you know, my tribe, you guys. That's what gets me going.
That's so beautiful.
Yeah, also very much the tribe of writers and good friends who I have, you know, heart and soul connections with. But I was also going to say, I do a lot of writing for my job. I work for the National Bullying Prevention Center. And so I just finished an essay on prevention and why it's so hard to believe that we can actually prevent bad things from happening. It's really not something people can wrap their heads around. But other than that, I have not been writing much. And this is actually, we had a conference a couple of weeks ago with the Warren Wilson graduates, and then this reading, and I've been looking at my old work and going like, who wrote this? Like, so these things remind us, and I think this ability to connect. I mean, we all decry sort of this awful stuff about technology, but this is fucking great. Yeah. I mean, this is amazing. You know, and here we are, and I can see little pieces of people's lives. Thank you for that, by the way. And you can see a little bit of mine. Yes, we drink wine. There's 2 wine bottles in there. Also a source of inspiration. And anyway, so just pulling it from the air, but doing some writing, not this other stuff that I love so much. But that can change any minute.
Any minute, yeah.
And do you find that the pandemic has made its way into your writing, either directly or in opposition, or? It
was already there. Yeah. I mean, and if you're like me, you're a sci-fi fantasy fan, you know, pandemics and things and social justice problems and class warfare, those were already there. Those were the main need. Like, this doesn't feel terribly new, but I'm always continually surprised, you know, when I have to put my mask on. I mean, I'm fine doing it, but anyways, not a surprise to me. So, yeah.
I was amused today reading the very beginning of the book, in which Agnes is talking about not being allowed into crowds and being kept away from them because of what they could. And I thought, holy cow, here we are. This is pandemic, you know, and it's right there. It wasn't written during the pandemic, but there it is. So kind of funny.
All right, you guys, participants, if you have any burning questions, please put them into the chat. I have one here from Joan Frank. It's very smart. It's for Helen. She says, intriguingly, your reading gave an almost sprightly tone to material that was or could surely be perceived as stunningly dark. The energy sparked by that juxtaposition is fresh as hell. Were you aware of that tone, material stark contrast?
You know, I think that the tone for the first 18 years of working on this was like, poor me, or, you know, this nothing. And so the tone was totally off. And I think it took a long time to sort of just go, you know what, it is what it is, and just run with it. Because it's actually, there's a lot of, when things get so dark, it just becomes ridiculously funny. I mean, look at the country, right? I mean, if you don't have a sense of humor, we would just all jump off the, you know, Golden Gate Bridge at this point, and I would have to travel to California to do that. So I think really humor, there is, if you cannot find something funny in your material, at least for me, I'm not a good enough writer to actually address tragedy head on. So I have to do it sort of, I have to find something funny in there, or I can't hope. I don't know. Do you guys, what do you think? Mari? Judy?
I think you have such a unique way of, it's kind of, you know, your personality, Helen, that does, it has a sense of joy, and then there's all this other stuff. And so I just think it's brilliant the way that comes together in your writing. And I just admired the heck out of it. And listening to you read today and having read the book, and it's just amazing. There's just all these intersections of comedy, tragedy, and it makes it possible to go on that journey with you. I think it's a great help to the reader.
Well, thank you. But like, look at that river of mice that Judy came up with. I mean, talk about the mix of this horrifying image, and yet it's exquisite. And then there's something really funny about this liquid mice getting a voice and whispering in the earth. Come on. I mean,
for me,
that's
cannot. Thank you. You're such a sweetheart. I would say never, ever create a head-on collision with content. I would say always come in through the side door. And I tend to come in through that little vent, you know, the vent that vents the methane gas out of your sewer lines. That's where I come in. It's like the tiniest little aperture in your home, you know, maybe it's that attic vent, you know, you have the swamp cooler. But I'd say never hit it head on. Come in through the side. And the reason why it's so powerful to listen to Mari and Helen's prose. And by the way, you need to buy your books, people. Everyone's on this.
You need something to distract you from the pandemic.
Yeah, well, we all can still get stuff delivered, right? But the reason why their prose is so powerful, the reason why you follow along with the story is because they come in through, for instance, with Mari, they come in through color and light and this transcendent sense of the space around this person. And Helen, the humor and the truly, the Menschkeit, you know, of this person, you know, navigating this story. So, and all those things, those are side door things. If you come in through the front door, I don't know, you know, it's not as interesting. And so you need to buy their books, people.
You need to buy the books. What we're saying is you need to buy the books.
Go right now. You're not buying mine, so buy there. And thank you.
Thank you.
All right, one final question. I apologize for everyone who's burning questions. It's a little hard to scroll through the entire thing. This is from Mari, and this is from Judith Dankoff. Did you have a special interest in art before you chose the topic? You write so well about her aesthetic sense.
Thank you, Judith. I did. I've always been interested in art. I spent a lot of time in high school studying books, trying to figure out why somebody was famous and somebody else wasn't. And so I started looking at things differently a long, long time ago. But for this, I took drawing lessons. I started taking drawing lessons because I wanted to understand how an artist looks at things. And that was just a tremendous eye-opener. And I'm also attached to place myself, and the character, therefore, is attached to place. And I love looking around and seeing what's there and observing things. So thank you, Judith. I'm glad. Thank you. That's all.
And one last thing, and then we'll have to shut it down. Are there any burning questions you have for each other?
Well, we talked about this. We'll have to do this again. We're going to have like an open forum.
I would love that. I have so many questions for you guys.
No, this time you guys are going to talk. Judith and Dinah. Yeah.
Maybe.
Sprawlites. Yeah.
Maybe. No burning questions for each other? You know each other too well. Two of you. All right, everybody. So unmute, and give it up for these ladies.
Thank you so much.
So
Beautiful.
much for joining us, everyone. And thank you, Mari. You've enriched our literary lives.
Thank you so
It's
much.
been more important during the pandemic.
Thank you for doing this, you guys. Sprawwl, you guys.
Thanks, Leslie.
You are so
Everyone.
welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks everyone for coming. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Bye.
Hey.
I'm finally getting to see some of the people that were like at the very bottom as they're leaving. I'm like, oh, so